Okay, Patrick, it's nice to have you here. You have a lot of admirers in the IT industry, but trust me, I'm the biggest one you have. Um, and I know that currently you wear a lot of hats, a lot of different types, and some of the most important ones are Apache Cassandra committer. You are a vice president, developer relations and data stacks, and you're on the technical oversight committee for Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and you inspire a lot of people. So today we would like to discover a little bit of your past adventures, like when you were growing up. We will try to touch upon Cassandra a little bit, but maybe it's easier to start with, okay, where were you born, and where did you live during
Wow.
your, I know, during your elementary school to high school time? Tell us more
Oh
about
my
that.
God. You really want to go back? Well, thanks, Armas, for
Yes.
having me. So, and thanks for this is your life. Let's see, where was I? Well, I was born in California. And I was born in Sierra Nevada, in a little town up in the Sierra Nevadas near the Nevada border. So I was yeah, in the mountains. That's where I was born. And let's see, I my dad was he worked for the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service, which is the people who maintain the national forests in the U.S. And so we just moved around a lot. I always lived out in the middle of the woods, way out in the middle of nowhere. So we just moved around a lot when I was a kid. So my background, I guess, is really just super rural. I lived in parts of the U.S. that people didn't know existed. Yeah.
So mostly away from the city, and it's mostly free about, like, you are in the middle of woods. You had a lot of
Yeah, it's in out of the
flexibility to.
woods. Yeah. Which is a funny thing. It's a funny place to start. Like if you want to get into computers. I mean, yeah.
I know. I know. That brings
Uh
to the next question, right? I was also wondering, did you first get a gaming console, or you touched a computer? Which one first, and what do you remember from your early memories?
yeah, that's a fun question. And I still have this machine. The first gaming console I got was a Magnavox Odyssey, and it was just a Pong game. And that
Wow,
was like 1974, I think. Yeah. So
cool.
I was just a little kid, but I mean, I still have it though. I still have it. I still have my Magnavox Odyssey. It was an Odyssey 2, and it just had like little paddle, like two little potentiometers on it, and did Pong. And I don't. It wasn't even microprocessor controlled. I actually opened it up. It's all analog logic. It's amazing to see that. But then I think I'm trying to remember. I think it was probably Atari 2600 was my next, because Pong gets old. You got to go to the 2600. But my first computer I bought, I think it was 1979, and that was the Atari 400, and that was a real computer. And that's actually when I first started programming, just because I was like so enamored by that. And I was born in '68, when the moon landing happened, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are inspired by like the moon landing, like the space program, like ooh. And I was one of those kids that was just watching that and saying, oh, well, I think it's really cool, and computers are a part of that. And during that time frame, that late '70s is when personal computers were just becoming a thing, and the Apple II, and the Trash 80, and all the different computers that were out there. So I was just really into it, and I remember my dad thought it was the craziest thing, and I bought it with my own money,
Oh, how did
Yeah.
you, like, you were saving monthly, or first of all, where did this idea of buying a computer came from? I think you mentioned the moon landing or the space program. That must be the inspiration.
Yeah, that was it. I was like, wow, I said, because it was all, that was kind of the mystique around the space programs. Everything was like the computers were the ones that really made it work. Yeah, there was a lot of human engineering, and that was cool. And I was watching, you watch the guys with the little skinny ties, the black skinny ties, lots of engineering, cool stuff. But it was really like it was the first time we've relied on computers to do something, and so that just I think a lot of people saw that, and just how do you get involved in that? And computers were part of that, and I was into it. But like I said, I lived out in the middle of nowhere, and there was no computer stores. There were no one had a computer, but I wanted one, and my dad thought it was crazy. But so, in order to make money, I started farming pigs. I started growing pigs, and I had like a pig breeding operation, and I was selling pigs on the market, and built up enough money to go buy a computer.
So
Yeah,
do you remember if it was like 6 months of savings or
God, and it took me a year
oh,
year to do that. Yeah, because Atari 400 in 1979 was fully kitted out, so that's 16K of RAM. It
that's a
had,
lot.
yeah, a basic cartridge, so you could do programming because everything had to be, and then the cassette player, so you could save your programs, was $500, and
Wow.
so that was a lot. And my dad, he thought I was crazy, but he's like, hey, like, you raise money, you get to do whatever you want, but I still think it's crazy.
And and what was the programming language?
Oh, it was all basic, but it was Atari basic.
Okay, Atari
But
base.
yeah, I mean, after a few years, you get sick of writing for loops and really slow Atari basic. So I started getting into assembly language programming. That's what everybody did. Good old 6502 assembly language programming.
And back then, I don't remember. Like, do you have books or you had to follow the documentation or the manuals?
It was always books, but there was a couple of really great magazines like Compute Magazine and Byte that always had something in it. That was one of the fun things about that era, was that the magazines had program listings that you would have to hand type in. And I remember me and my friend from high school spending hours typing in these massive programs, and you have to debug it. Like, you get one typo and the whole thing breaks. So but it was mostly books and magazines, and you always had to mail order them. There was no stores that had that. I had to You would get a magazine, and in the back there would always be like, they would sell books, or you would call them, actually, like, pick up a phone and say, hey, do you have a book on assembly programming language for a 6502? And they're like, yeah, we have three, we recommend this one. That was Amazon in like 1981.
Whenever you want, you can call 24/7, right?
Right. You just called some computer shop, and they would tell you, oh, yeah, I'll send you this book. Send me, and they would have you send the money first, though.
And briefly, you mentioned about the Atari 2600. Do you remember what was your favorite game?
Oh, man. I knew you would be on the game thing. I think the one that River Raid was probably my all-time favorite.
Yeah, that
Yes.
that was mine too.
Yeah, it's still playable. I still play that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun game. I still remember I played a lot of it.
And
So
Combat was like the cartridge that came in the pack-in game was always fun too.
yeah.
Like, you had the tank game where you shoot each other. I remember just playing that for hours with friends.
So we did touch upon a little bit of early on, like how you got your computer. I know that you're big into databases. So before getting into databases, what other things you worked on, like technologies?
Yeah, I mean, because I was into it so early and there was no one else into it, I started getting into like the actual business of compute stuff, and I got into CPM. And a lot of people probably have no idea what CPM is, but that was
Yeah,
really, it was a
I'm nodding my head, but I have no clue.
yeah, you have no idea. CPM was really the begin. It was one of the first more common operating systems that were out there, and it was for business. That's where you ran word processors and spreadsheets and things like that. And it was a CPM. If you saw CPM today, you would say that looks a lot like DOS, and it was. It was the kind of the predecessor to DOS, and DOS was actually derived from CPM eventually. So DOS, the disk operating system that IBM used on the IBM PC, was like just an extension of CPM, and it kept going. So CPM was the first one, and CPM really ran only on the Z80 processors. So that was another thing. But yeah, I started I started getting paid for doing computer work when I was like 13. because no one else knew how to do it. And there was some logging companies that were using computers to do spreadsheets and things like that. And they would pay me to like set it up and make sure it worked and hook up the printers and stuff like that. And so it was just really nerdy.
You were very
Yeah.
hands-on because you had a PC at home or a personal computer, right? Probably that really helped you getting into this CPM stuff.
Yeah, it was just because no one else knew how. They were like, oh, and at the time it was like, oh, find a kid because they're the only one using computers now. Yeah, exactly.
Now, if you ask me what I can think of CPM as a cluster package manager.
No, it's not that. Well, that was the first computer conference I went to too. It was CPM 83, and it was at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. Same Moscone Center we've probably all been to for like Oracle Open World and Salesforce at the Dreamforce. And I mean, I think VMware does their conference at the Moscone Center. So yeah, it was brand new Moscone Center in 1983, and I went to a computer conference there and met Steve Wozniak. That was
Wow.
pretty cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was still at Apple. But yeah, it was a large group of nerds in the Bay Area, and that was my first. I was 13. Yeah, I was 13 years old and 12 or 13, and just that just made my eyes like this, because I'm going to the big city. First of all, I'd never been in a big city, and going to see that, I was hooked. I was like, this is what I want to do. Yeah.
And did you see a lot of other 13-year-olds, or they were all elderly people?
There was a lot of folks there that were starting. I think the CPM was more about business, and so there's some older names like Gary Kildall, another name that probably not a lot of people know, but he was the guy who invented CPM, but really he invented DOS. So, and he was, like we have like nerdy celebrity folks out there, and still to this day, like, oh, this person invented this or they invented that. Gary Kildall from Digital Computing was the guy who invented CPM, and he was a celebrity. Everybody wanted to talk to him, and yeah, and what's his name? Oh God, Osborne, the Osborne Computing guy. He was there. So these are like early days of like, but still had that kind of like, there was these people in the industry that were making things happen and moving things forward, and they all got keynotes.
Yeah. I know. That was a very interesting time because everybody was researching and everybody was trying to develop something new. And it was very early on, right? There is no internet. So
no, that was it. There was no internet. Everything was on floppy disks, if you're lucky. There were other ways of getting programs in, but I still think like right now there's still such a really strong retro computing age, and it's that era that people want to recreate. The 8-bit computers from back then. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of young kids now like the 8-bit graphics games, especially.
Yeah.
Like Minecraft is super hit because of that. So
yeah, it is.
Yeah, sure. Now that we talked a little bit of going to the conference in 83, I know that you got a medal at US Navy. So
yeah, just jump right into that.
Well, that's more interesting right now because I want to know all about that medal you got at Navy.
Well, so yeah, as a lot of people do in the US, to get out of your small town, the way to do that was to join the military, like the Army, Navy, something. And so I did not want to become a logger, like someone who cuts down trees for a living, because that was the only job in my town. And so or more pig farming. So I joined the Navy. When the Navy recruiter came around and said, "Hey, sign here and see the world," I'm like, so when I was 17 years old, I signed the papers and joined the Navy. Yeah, and at that time, I didn't really think that I could go to college. I didn't have a good academic background, so I thought, this is the right thing for me to do. I didn't think I could go to university, so I'll just go join the Navy. Well, when I got there, when I signed up, they said, "Hey, do you want to work on computers?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds, yeah, I do that all the time. I want to do that." So that's why I signed up. So when I signed up, I got to go to school to be a data systems technician, which is what they call it, and it was really cool. But what's funny is the Navy, U.S. Navy, did not have any modern computers.
That's
All of the computers
strange.
I worked on were from the 1960s, like big, huge computers with like single cards, and oh, it was terrible. But what probably shaped a lot of my career was during that time frame. I was in for 6 years, and I worked on digital communications. So every ship, and this is like ships, not just US ships, but NATO ships that could communicate over a digital packet radio. So it's basically like a little mini, like an internet amongst ships, and they share things like radar and sensor pictures and things like that. And so I learned how to run those, how to maintain and run those systems for digital communications, and it was pretty cool. I mean, and we would set up these networks, ad hoc networks out in the middle of the ocean. And that was really, for me, that was just a really interesting technical challenge. The story I told you before, and the one that you thought was pretty cool, was there was one case, and it was
So,
just, we were just,
so one
yeah, go
interruption.
ahead.
Before we go to the actual story, so the communication between these ships was happening using radio waves. Is that correct?
Yeah, UHF radio. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Computer History Museum in San Jose, I think it's in Mountain View, it's next to the Google campus, there is an entire display on this thing called the Naval Tactical Data System, NTDS, and they have this whole section. And I had no idea at the time, but apparently it was very groundbreaking, because that was where a lot of the internet was, like a lot of the ideas for the internet were designed. And so NTDS is what I worked on, the Naval Tactical Data System. So if you're ever at the Computer History Museum, there's a section in there, and I could probably point at a few things that I worked on back in the day. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So they use radio waves, but there was also satellites involved a little bit. Right?
Any kind of any kind of radio transmission, any way to get a radio communication. So yeah, I know where you're leading to. Like, we used UHF radios, and that's actually, this is the meat of the story, is we use UHF, and UHF, ultra high frequency radio, is line of sight. It's like a cell phone. So if you can't see the antenna, you can't transmit to it. And as the Earth is apparently a sphere, I still think it is. The radio horizon is around 24 miles, 5 miles. So if you don't have a ship or an aircraft or anything that can relay it to the next hop over, your communication range is about 25 miles. And so, and my ship, I was on the John Hancock, which is a destroyer. We were going to go into some pretty nasty places, and the captain of our ship was like, "Hey, can we?" And we were going to go alone. The battle group, we were going to leave the battle group and go off on our own. And we did that a lot, just kind of because of the ship we were. But he was really worried, because he's like, he wanted his internet connection. He wanted to be able to connect back to the battle group. And that wasn't going to happen. I'm like, well, sir, no, that's not going to happen, because we're going to be farther than 25 miles. And he's like, I really don't want this to go down. So as I thought about it, I'm like, and I had a friend who worked in the radio room, and he and I talked a bit. I'm like, can we bounce this off a satellite? And he's like, I don't see why not. I mean, it's all radio. And so we figured it out. And through an enormous amount of hacking on a ship in the middle of the Mediterranean, we figured out how to reroute all the radio signals and patch it, and basically, without even asking, took over a satellite, a military satellite, and figured out how to bounce it. And then so we called somebody in the battle group and said, "Hey, this is what we did." And I was like, explained the thing, and they're like, "Oh, okay." And they got it all rigged up on their side, and all of a sudden we had a battle. We had our battle group picture again, and everyone was like, "Yes!" And nothing happened, of course. It was like, it was inconsequential, but it was just kind of a cool hack. I was like, and yeah, I think the
So,
funny
so,
part was,
but basically you overcome that 24-kilometer radius thing
yeah, we
for the
eliminated that.
communication. So
Yeah,
that
we
could be the first time, probably on a US ship, they see the long range communication possible.
like that in the way I did it. Yeah.
Right.
It was, yeah, it was, I didn't know that no one had ever done it before. And so, yeah, the part that you asked about, like, I found out later because the battle group commander flew to my ship, and I was told, hey, why don't you go up to the flight deck, and uh, Rear Admiral Katz is up there, and he's got something for you. And it was a Navy Commendation Medal because no
Nice.
one had ever done that before, and
Nice.
it cracks me up because I basically got a medal for hacking.
And that's the patent, basically. There was no patents in those days, I guess, for this kind of
Oh,
things.
yeah, I was out in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, it was just here it is. Put a medal
and
on.
and that's amazing. Like, not only doing the service, but inventing something and getting a medal for that. Even if it is 6 days of work, it's just too good.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Yeah, and I mean it was cool, and it was actually that moment where I'm like I knew I needed to get out of the Navy because I'm like I want to go do more
You can do
awesomer
more.
things.
You
Yeah, I
can
want
do
to.
more like
This is fun.
smashing the Raspberry Pis, right? We'll get to
Well, it
that
was what.
later.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was what. It's like maybe I should go to university. Maybe I should go get a university education.
And
Um,
during those years when you were at working on the ships, did you visit a lot of other countries?
oh yeah. I've been to a lot of countries.
And
Africa, Middle East.
anything stands out as a good memory?
Oh yeah. I spent a lot of time in Bahrain. Yeah. But a lot
Summer.
of time in Norway too, because we did a lot of work up in North Atlantic, but I love Norway. Norway was just a great country to hang out. The fjords in Norway are some of the most amazing things if you could ever see them. I mean, you just can't believe that they exist. Yeah.
That's cool. And so when you're getting this medal, like how many people did you think of, like as your team, who pulled this off? Right. Obviously,
It
you did
was
majority of work, but
well, it was just me and the guy in the radio room, and he was just the one who helped me flip the switches. But it really, I have to say, I mean, it wasn't a lot of work. It was just a different idea. It's just kind of a crazy idea, and it just happened to work. I was actually really lucky it worked. It could have not worked, and I don't know what I would have done then. But yeah, we didn't. I was the only person on the ship that worked um, on a data link, which
on the communication technology,
on the digital communication. Yeah, and that
digital
was a
communication.
really funny thing. It's like, what if I get killed? Well, I guess we don't have anybody.
No,
Like a
no
bus backer
backup,
of one. Yeah,
no backup.
exactly.
So,
No.
so what did you feel in front of your crew, right? Obviously, you're getting this medal, one of the highest honors in Navy. Like, what
It's
was
not the
your,
highest. It's a good one. I
but
was
what
like,
was
yeah, it's
going
pretty
through your
cool.
mind?
I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And I'm gonna get killed. They're gonna kill me because they're like, oh sure, yeah, that's stupid thing, and you get a Navy Commendation Medal. And yeah, okay, but yeah, I was just like really worried about like I'm gonna get killed as soon as I go below decks. But
And
that's how it works in the military.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, best kept secrets, I guess.
yeah. I
So,
mean, it was the thing.
you just mentioned that after that happened, you wanted to move on. So how long did you stay in Navy after that? After the medal
Well,
and
yeah, I signed up for 6 years, and so at the end of my 6 years, I got out, and like I said, I knew immediately that I wanted to get a university education, and so yeah, and I was 24 at the time, so I started pretty late. So if anyone's out there, like, should I start my education late? Yeah, anytime. So
anytime? Yes.
yeah, and so yeah, I spent some time. I spent a long time because I was working because I had to work to pay for going to university. But yeah, I went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, which is in California. It's a engineering school. Spent 6 years getting that job done, but yeah, I got a computer engineering degree, and I count it back to like, oh, I wanted to do more with it. You know, you get into technology, and I think anybody who's listening who's starting in technology, you know, you follow your passion, but it made it easier to say yes to something like that. And yeah, I started out late, but that's okay. That's
No,
fine.
you're not late. You touched electronics way early. So now that we know you are a gamer, tell us
Yeah.
more about your gaming hobby and how it influences your life, Cassandra life, especially. Uh,
Cassandra life. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I think I've owned every single PlayStation, and you know that. Yeah. I love the PlayStation. I think I have a
and I
hacked
have that
Xbox
channel.
somewhere.
Nah,
Yeah, you do.
I have
You
the
have a
channel. I
PlayStation
love
channel.
PlayStation. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know, and it's interesting because when I first started working with Cassandra, um, you know, that was probably a couple years. I was a consultant for a few years, but one of the consulting jobs I had was at Sony, working on bringing Cassandra to the PlayStation Network. And I couldn't have been more of a fanboy. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, and it was so much fun. But yeah, working on the data models and everything for this Sony PlayStation Network was just really exciting. And it still runs today on Cassandra. But yeah, how does it influence my gaming? Well, I just don't stop. I mean, I've been gaming since I was a little kid, and I think it's fantastic.
What are you playing today?
I just finished God of War Ragnarok.
All done.
I didn't 100% it, but I finished the story.
Nice,
So
nice.
yeah, I got to go clean up a few things. But yeah, I finished the story, which is an amazing story. If anyone wants, you know, just to be entertained by a video game, it's amazing. It's
Amazing.
just a
Yes,
really good story.
definitely.
Yeah. Did you
So,
finish it?
so I finished the main story. Same thing. I'm just cleaning up the collectibles and whatever we need
Yeah.
to collect after. So there are a
Yeah. You
few,
and Freya going
yeah,
around. Yeah.
few more story related stuff is remaining because I do encounter some new people. Like I just saw Na, so there is little
Right.
bit of fight remaining. Now, you mentioned Sony PlayStation Network was coming to Cassandra. Do you remember what they were moving from? Is it worth mentioning?
Yeah, they talk about it in a public presentation, so I don't think I'm sharing anything out of hand. They were pretty strong Oracle shop, and you know, and of course that was a easy choice in 2000. I was an Oracle DBA, of course, but you know, I think the thing that gaming companies were dealing with was Oracle's great in one data center, but if you're truly global and you need to have 3 or 4 data centers worth of data, how do you do that? And that's why they were there. That's what I helped them with, was like, how do we make sure that, like, if you're in Europe or in Asia or in North America, that you have a pretty consistent PlayStation Network experience. So yeah, that was where they came from. I'm sure they still have some in there somewhere, but you know, it
And
comes down to where they are.
and we have so many what is a massively multiplayer games these days. Like all this you can have iPad. People can connect from different devices. It's not about consoles. Do you know of
No.
any other gaming company using Cassandra right now for that kind of massive workloads?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few actually. Like Electronic Arts and Activision have talked about how they use Cassandra quite a bit. There's casual gaming like Zebra Gaming that use Cassandra quite a bit. I think I want to say Riot was for a while, or maybe they were using React. But yeah, Cassandra usage in gaming companies is pretty prevalent. And actually, I was doing some work with Demonware, which is an Activision company, on Call of Duty, and I learned really quickly why they needed it. As soon as you launch a game, I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of people that just want to DDoS the API servers, and they were just prepared for it. They knew how to handle it. And so when the game launches and the multiplayer stuff, you have these every console connects to an API endpoint somewhere, and that's how you do things like matchmaking and saving your game and that sort of stuff. Somebody would like, hey, we're gonna DDoS that API and shut it down, so it basically ruins the experience for everybody. But these big gaming companies like Activision, they are totally ready for it. They're like, yeah, this is gonna happen. So, and they have all these different things that they do to mitigate it. But one of the things was, like the Cassandra database that they had took all the load. It was just like a big spike in writes, but then it leveled out. It didn't bring down the database. So that was something I was surprised by. Like, oh yeah, I guess that's the thing.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's where you feel very proud when you have built a system and it stands up to the load, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because nobody wants a crash system, right? Like,
That's
especially the one that you spend a lot of time working on. But for gaming, it's even more important because when they launch a game, a big AAA title, like when that title gets released, that could be $1 billion event.
Oh yeah.
A crash
Yeah.
is not okay.
Not acceptable.
Right.
Even couple of hours, right? It's just a loss of business.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's pretty common. The world runs on e-commerce now. I mean, and
Yes.
and the name of the game of e-commerce is online, because when you're not online, you're not making money.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So we did touch upon the God of War. So give us a little bit about when you played God of War in 2018 on PS4. Now
Yeah.
you're playing Ragnarok on PS5. What did you feel like the story-wise? You're happy with the continuation, what they made?
Yeah, no, I think it was perfect. I think what they did in the story was, I think it's like a perfect sequel. So yeah, they picked it right up. I mean, when you pick up Ragnarok, it's right where you left off. And I it's funny because my kids laugh about how I'm really into the story games. But I mean, those are like movies for me.
Yep.
Really, like a movie that lasts weeks. But I just really, I think that the stories that these games are telling now are so good. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. So some of us remember Unix from the old days, right? And then over the period of time, now a lot of people have forgot about Unix. We all moved to Linux. What was your feeling when we were moving from Unix to Linux, and what do you see the future for Linux?
Yeah, that's funny. My feeling at the time was I can't afford Unix, and thank God for Linux. I started using Linux in early 93, I think it was. It was before the 1.0. And it's because I had used things like VAX, VMS, and other systems like that in the past, that I enjoyed using Unix for what it did, and of course I wanted to use it more, but at the time in 1993, if you wanted to use Unix, you had to pay $15,000 for a license. It was not cheap. There was no such thing as free operating systems back then. And so you could get a hacked version of something, but don't do that. So yeah, when Linux came around, and on my 24 floppy disks, and I installed it on my 486, it was just the best ever, because I was working at the university at the time, and the one I was going to, and we started standardizing all our systems on Linux, and it was just because we could do whatever we wanted with it.
Right, it's because of the free choice.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about Linux was that I could fix things like because I worked at a university, we got a lot of donations from big companies. If you remember that company 3Com, the network card company, I think they got bought by Cisco along the way. So 3Com was the Ethernet card company. They were the ones, and they donated a few boxes of these really cool 100 megabit cards. So that was the fastest card you could get, is 100 megabit Ethernet cards. And they donated it to us, and we're like, what are we going to do with this? And there was no computer that had a driver for it because they were brand new. But the Linux machines, we could do whatever. So my boss just threw the box onto my desk, and he's like, figure out how to make this work with Linux. So that was my first time in the Linux kernel, and I was hooked because I was able to make the 3Com 100 megabit cards work on our Linux kernel, and did the patch for it and everything, and was able to take advantage of this card. It was like, wow, this is like, that's the freedom part. Like, oh, I love this. Yeah. And that's actually how I got really into open source too. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. So it's not just free from the cost perspective, but it's the freedom you get when you work with open source.
Yeah, I contributed to patch. There was a guy at NASA JPL that was at the time, like this is in '95, I think, was collecting all of the network driver patches, and so I sent him an email and I said, hey, I just I have this 905 card that you've probably never seen before, but here it is. And he's like, awesome, thanks. And he wrapped it up into some patch set that he had for cards. It was great. It was sharing. That's what it was about.
And in today we have a lot of distributions. Do you have a favorite Linux distro?
I probably like everyone else. I just use Ubuntu.
Okay.
It's solid. I've gotten to the point in my Linux life where I like things that just work, and I hope that we're at that point. And Ubuntu is really solid.
Yeah, pretty solid. Okay, so when did you realize you were born to work with databases? And also tell us a little bit about, I know you love Cassandra. What other databases did you work on before coming here, reaching to Cassandra? I mean.
Yeah, when did I start working at databases? I think it was, I was doing just a lot of general purpose C++ programming in the 90s. And that's when, I think it was whenever I started doing some work on distributed computing around that time too. And it was, at the time, it was RPC. Everything was RPC, Sun RPC. So I was doing a lot of C++ programming on Sun. And but it was clear that as the internet was starting to evolve, is that databases were a key component of that, because now we have to store our state. And that was actually something I worked on early. I built a database, relational database, as a project, and it just kind of opened up my eyes. So like, this is going to be a key part of the internet. And so I started working more and more on a lot of different databases. And Oracle, of course, was the one that I jumped into because I figured I could make money off of this. So, and sure enough, my first contracts in the .com era in the late 90s were writing Java code to work against Oracle. And that was great. I made tons of money off of that. And for a long time, I dabbled in other databases like IBM DB2 running on CICS, like trying to get into mainframes. But Oracle was really the cool kid at that point. And I just really started getting into it, and got my DBA certificate and everything. That was the early 2000s. Yeah.
And the journey continues. So when did you get started with Cassandra, or how did you get to know about Cassandra?
Yeah, I was running engineering and chief architect at a company, an education company, ed tech company, and we constantly ran into problems with load, because an ed tech company, we had these thundering herd problems where like traffic would spike. And I think this is when everybody was having these problems, like 2008. Like it's clear the internet is here to stay. It's clear that everybody's on it and wants to use more of it. And all the relational databases we had were stumbling and falling and crashing, and it was just took too much effort to keep things online. And we were putting lots of hardware into our Oracle systems and our MySQL systems. So, we're just trying to keep them alive, and it wasn't working. And so I did some really terrible things with our Oracle database, turned into a key value store. And at that point, I realized I need to start looking for alternatives. So I was doing a panel at a computer conference, and a friend of mine was there on the same panel. His name was Adrian Cockcroft, and he was at Netflix. And we were talking about some challenges that I was having. And he's like, we started using Cassandra, this database Cassandra at Netflix. I'm like, never heard of it. Okay, I'll give it a shot. And it was like 0.6 or 0.7 then. So that night, and Adrian still tells the story. He's like, yeah, I changed your career with that one lunch. I'm like, yeah, thanks. But yeah, I started using it, and I realized, oh, this might be a solution for a lot of our problems that we have on the back end. So I grabbed one of our interns and I said, all right, let's try a POC. And that was in 2011. And we got a bunch of some of the more high value apps that, that crashed all the time, and put it on the system. And we went through a whole cycle, and the database never went down. And I was like, that is the database for me. Yeah.
Yeah, Adrian is a great speaker. He inspires a lot of people. Even I watched a lot of his early on when Netflix was going into cloud. So he had a lot of this architecture related talks.
Yeah, yeah, he did.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I thought you had another story.
No. I was just gonna say, yeah, Adrian is that guy.
Is a great person.
Yeah.
So in 2015, you abused Cassandra clusters in public with hammers and wire cutters. So
yes,
tell us about that. I know the video still exists.
Oh, there's a lot of them out there, and it wasn't just me. John Haddad was doing it too. Yeah, and I even have a picture of Jonathan Ellis doing it. Yeah, we were trying to come up with a way to demonstrate this, the desirability of uptime, and in a way that was a little more shocking. And so we were talking about, like, well, what are we trying to avoid? How about a down data center? All right, well, how do you demonstrate that? I mean, that's a killer feature. How do you demonstrate that? And there was some people that were doing some stuff with Raspberry Pis at DataStax, just running Cassandra in it. But then there was a couple of demos where they would just unplug it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool way to do it. But what if we did something crazier? And so at OSCON, I think it was in 2014. This was at the time, it was when all the NoSQL databases were trying to become something. So we were at OSCON in Portland, and we rigged up this little box. We had a plexiglass box so that no one would get hurt from all the flying shrapnel. And we would invite people to come up and like drill through a Raspberry Pi or hit it with a hammer or chisel or whatever, and just destroying Raspberry Pis. But the whole time we had an app running, and it was keep running as this thing is getting destroyed. And it was really effective, because people would be like, that's violent. What is going on to this poor cluster? And the fact that it's still online was the best demo. And I did it a lot.
it was an amazing demo. Like, I think I was reading a lot about Chaos Monkey, and all those discussions about Chaos Monkey and all that in AWS. And probably that was the time I saw you. I mean, I saw your video, and then I felt that was so amazing. Like, it's so dramatic to show what can happen in your data center, right? Right. And then keep the database still running. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what it was meant to do. And for for a lot of folks, I think it changed their opinion on like what uptime should look like.
Correct.
Yeah.
So now we have a lot of young people coming into the industry, right? With let's say they're getting into the database. What advice do you want to give them if they're looking into Cassandra?
First things first is don't run Cassandra as much as you can. I think we're at the point now where if you want to be hands-on, get into cloud native. That's deploy infrastructure declaratively, and don't download the bits and try to run a jar file manually. Think about how you deploy large infrastructure even on the small scale. So Kubernetes is a great place to start now, because that's the wave of the future that the next 10 years is going to be declaring what you need, and then it will emerge into your hardware. But it's also learning. I think it's also learning more breadth, like learning different aspects of the stack, and keeping not going so deep. Like when I started, it was always like you pick one thing and you just go as far down in it as possible, but you miss the breadth. And I think that's not needed anymore. You can go wide, learn 3 or 4 programming languages, learn 2 or 3 clouds. I think that's what's going to keep you very employable for a long time.
And then you can also cover what is the future for Cassandra next 10 years. Where will you see Cassandra?
Yeah, well, I think the future is very, very good. I mean, we have a really strong project, and there's just really solid contributions coming from companies that make it work. And that's one of the best things about the project that I love is like there's all of my friends, fellow committers on the project we all work at different companies, and but we're all solving problems, and like real problems. We're not just like shipping new features. That's not the point. We're solving a problem and then sharing it. So the next 10 years is going to be, I think, Cassandra being more like easier and more ubiquitous. It'll just run in a variety of environments. But more importantly, I think it will become for a developer a lot easier to consume in a lot of different ways. Like the way we're handling different document models.
I think you're talking about Stargate API.
Yeah, but it's going to be more than that. It's going to be how the storage engine works. The storage engine dictates everything, right? The way you store data, because as soon as you start moving away from how the data is stored on disk, then it becomes less performant and more of a hack. So the more variety we have of storing data on disk, the more variety developers get from the top.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
that's where it's headed.
Cool. So thank you very much for talking a lot. Like, do you have any closing thoughts? Like, you want to say anything else? Or, I mean, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground, but I mean, I just hope that everyone gets involved. I mean, this is a really cool project, and it's a cool industry, and I don't care what you work on, just get involved in the community. This is how we keep each other moving forward.
Yes, that's what I loved from the day one of Cassandra. Like I started about 7+ years ago, and I loved the community involvement. Whenever I needed something, I was able to get help. There is a lot of community resource, like people talk about it, writing blogs, videos. So that's what really inspired me to stay in this community, like stay active. I mean,
yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
perfect. It's an important part of it. Sharing everything you can, just because it will help somebody. It'll help the next person.
Right. Right.
And that's how we keep building.
That's true. And there are a couple of things we did not discuss about. The one thing you mentioned is how can we run things not by downloading a jar. Right. I recently played with DataStax AstroDB, which is next phase of Cassandra. I really love the ease of use. Push few buttons, you have your database running, and you don't have to worry about where it is running. Right. It's all taken care of as the infrastructure is on the cloud. Always available.
We run all that in Kubernetes too.
Right. Yeah. That's a wonderful product. I can say. That's cool.
Great. Yeah.
Cool. And I think we should do this kind of general talks a little bit more, which which goes beyond our technical life and brings back some memories.
Yeah, and I think you should go find some more folks and find. I want to hear what some people would say about your questions.
You have any names?
I think you should go find John Haddad. You were looking for him. I'm gonna call him out.
Okay, I'll try to get something going.
Aaron would be good too. Aaron Plotz would be
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I have been asking him. He is busy with the podcast, so I'll find him one day. Cool. Thank you very much, Patrick. You have a wonderful evening, and thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you.